All right, let's get started. So, warm welcome to this session here. It's going to be a survival guide if you really want to do VDI with Microsoft only. Whoever did that? Okay, Claudio did that and Frank did that. Okay, kind of. Oh yeah, okay, the MVP, so the typical crowd. Nobody else. That is roughly what we experience when talking to people, even within the MVP community. That's pretty rough finding out whoever did that. Okay, so I also belong to this MVP crowd. My name is Benny Tritsch, for those of you who don't know me. And, well, I'm in this MVP community almost as long as Claudio is. So Claudio is the first MVP ever for terminal services. And I think I'm the, well, yeah, I think the second one who is still on the program. The second oldest MVP, 11 years now.
I'm the third oldest.
Huh?
I'm the third oldest.
Really? Wow.
We have some on here.
Yeah. Okay, and this is what it used to be over here, just to give you an impression. It was wild and rough and fighting sharks and stuff like that. And where's the beer? I'm missing the beer on stage. So, okay, a little bit about me. Well, I like community stuff. I like my lab. I like working together with Sean Bass. Whoever saw a session that was presented together with Sean Bass, when I did that, it's fun working with him. I'm a passionate scuba diver. I like beer, I like guitars, I like barbecue. I work for BlueQ now. I'm back in consulting, CTO at BlueQ. Formerly I worked at CERN, high energy physicist originally, so I had a career before I joined IT industry. And, well, from Germany. So that's pretty much what you need to know about me. Now, what are we going to do? Talk about VDI architecture that comes from Microsoft, looking at how to prep the VMs that we want to use in that environment, high availability and scalability, just say some words about that. User profiles, fortunately, Frank and Wilco already covered most of that, so I can go over that pretty fast. Yeah, the video already started. And talking about licensing and some notes from the field. So that's going to be the agenda for those 35, 40 minutes. First of all, yeah, we want to go on this road with Microsoft only. And, well, there seems to be some bright light at the horizon, but as a matter of fact, it's much harder than most people expect it to be. And this is, well, what we find out, that almost nobody ever really tried it out or has it up and running in a production environment. And now, what are the reasons for that? Because if you look at it, and this was also introduced by Frank and Wilco earlier today, that there were some name changes within the Microsoft infrastructure for VDI and remote desktop services, but basically it's still the same components. So if you go through this, there are name changes, fine. At the beginning, this remote desktop virtualization host didn't have a name at all. It was like this Hyper-V server hosting a bunch of virtual machines. That is the VDI solution provided by Microsoft. That was it at the beginning until they came up with that name. I still call it VDI because I think it's still very confusing if you have the RDSH for the terminal services role and RDVH for the VDI role. I always mix them up. And that's the same for the Microsoft folks. So if you attend one of their sessions, they always run into the same sort of trap. So I'm going to refer to VDI and going to refer to terminal services. But as the title indicates, we're going to concentrate on the VDI side of things. Good. So that is only one side of the story, the back end. The front end is the clients. So again, like Frank and Wilco already pointed out, there are more clients out there now. And as a matter of fact, they work better than we expected. But the reason is that Microsoft acquired a company, ITAB, that did the development. And this is the reason why we have pretty well-developed iPad clients, but we don't have the same client for Windows RT or Windows Phone. So that is funny. It's embarrassing for the Microsoft folks, actually. And it's always an interesting conversation to have with them. If you ask them, hey, when are you going to come up with the Windows Phone client? Very funny. So they're working on it. They're working on it, but they have to do it by themselves. So that is the challenge that they have. Good. If you put all, yeah.
Do you have any experience with the behavior of the iOS client versus a native Windows client? Does it feel the same way?
They adapted. So the question was, does the iOS client feel the same like the Windows client, the native Windows clients? No, it does not. So they adapted it. They adapted the look and feel and some of the interaction, and they're working on being even more adaptive to the native platform underneath. So that is not the same strategy like Citrix has. They try to make it look the same on each platform, while Microsoft is trying to make it look like an iOS application on iOS and an Android application on Android. They are not as far as they want to be, but this is the general direction they want to walk into. So it's a different strategy. Now if you put all these together, this brings up that pretty familiar picture that many of you have seen before. It looks like a Citrix architecture and to a certain extent also like a VMware architecture. So there's not a big difference between all of those. So you have a web access component, a broker component, you have the gateway component, some connectivity to Active Directory, and you have both the VDI and the terminal server workers on the right-hand side. Now, if we really want to concentrate on VDI only, we eliminate the terminal server component, even though the rest of the components will stay the same. So there's no change here. This is the good news. This has not always been the case. There have been times when the architectures looked fundamentally different if you looked at VDI on one side and terminal services on the other side. The reason was that the broker was not built, not designed to talk to a hypervisor. So they had to make the broker component aware of that there is a concept of virtual Windows machines, client machines running on a hypervisor, and not managing user sessions running on a server operating system. So that was a thing that they had to solve first. Now, if we're talking about VDI, we always have this conversation about pooled VMs and private VMs. So the difference is one is disposed. It's a disposable VM, so it is recreated whenever the user logs on, while the private VM is maintained. So you always log on to the same VM. We will look at the resource requirements a little later in the scalability section of this presentation. So, but it's very easy to imagine that if you have a master image and you recreate those VMs again and again, it requires less resources compared to having private VMs. So that is a natural thing to do. Now the question is, how does Microsoft deal with that kind of scenarios? The private VM scenario is pretty simple. You have one master, and you copy the master to a dedicated file location for each user, and then you maintain the VM for this user for the entire life of this VM. Things here are a little bit different. So this is why I wanted to show you what it looks like if you go through the wizards to install that particular role in the Microsoft environment. And you see here that you can select between a pooled virtual desktop collection and a personal virtual desktop collection. And here are the capabilities that are required. I mean, a permanent user assignment to a virtual desktop does not apply to a pooled virtual desktop for obvious reasons. And also here is, do I want to automatically create and manage virtual desktops? Absolutely. If I have pooled virtual desktops, I better do that, because manually creating them doesn't make any sense. Now here is a virtual desktop template, and the template is a Sysprepped image. So there is no image management on the Microsoft side. All they got is Sysprepped. And they also use it for VDI environments. And I mean, on one side, it looks like it is back in the old times, still dealing with Sysprepped and well, some unattended setup files. On the other side, there's a lot of experience out there doing that kind of stuff. So people have done that for many years. And the other thing that I wanted to show you, that you can select where you want to store those resulting images. And there's a fundamental difference between all of those. depending if you store it on a clustered volume, for example, which is much faster using SMP3. So this is really powerful if you have a bigger environment that you want to manage instead of only storing it on standard spindles. So we're talking about IOPS at this point, and I'm going to come back to this in a little bit. So one of the most important things that you have to know is, well, you assign users through the connection broker to either private VMs or pooled VMs. And it requires some management console. Now let's take a look at the management console, because that is one of the major limitations that we find out there. So what I did is I have an environment up and running here, but it's a terminal server environment because I cannot install a VDI environment on a laptop only. That doesn't work. So it's a chicken and egg problem, because I need to have a Hyper-V machine that hosts the VMs, but the Hyper-V machine needs to be in a domain. Yes, I can do that by spinning up a domain controller, a virtual machine with a domain controller, but then sometimes the Hyper-V machine has to wait until the domain controller is up and running. And that sometimes creates some issues on one of those machines. So I stopped doing that. I did that in the past, but it is not very good for demo reasons. But I can also show you the user interface in a collection on an RDSH, on a terminal server environment, because it looks the same. Now what I wanted to show you is we are in a collection. A collection is what is the Microsoft terminology for a farm. So they put everything into a collection that is either user sessions or is individual VMs. So if you go to Server Manager into this collection view, and now I'll make it a little bit larger so that you can see it. So you see here all these connections that are created now. So it's user connections. This is all you get from a user environment perspective, from a user interface perspective. Yeah, you could create new collections. Here is this collection that I'm using right now, so if I go to this task, it allows me to create a new collection. This is possible, so a new farm if I have multiple servers that I want to manage. But as soon as the users are logged on, this is all you have. Now, try to imagine that you have more than 200, 300, 400 users connected to your VDI environment. I mean, you can right-click on each of these users and you can disconnect it, send a message, shadow, log off. That is pretty much what you can do. You can use the filter. It's better than expected, because if I type add and administrator and Adam is the same, but as soon as I add another A, yeah, it starts filtering like it does with Bing. So typically the same method they have with Bing when you start typing, that they already start searching in the background. This is pretty much the same thing that they build in here. You can sort of store those filter criteria. You can add criteria, what you want to see. So this is the sort of UI you have. I mean, if you compare it to what Citrix and VMware have in their management consoles, that's far away from what you have with something that was built to manage VDI environments. This server manager was never built to do that. It's like an extension that did not receive too much, work days and work months, and so this is the result. And just for you to see, this is what you got. The alternative is that you start using System Center. And I mean, installing and establishing System Center right from the beginning, if you only want to manage like 100 or 200 users, if you do not have already System Center in your environment, is a big task. So it's more or less all or nothing. Is there any of the experts who wants to add something to that? Just want to make sure that we all agree on that.
I'll refrain from.
Maybe you found something that I did not find. Okay, now it's a lot about prepping VMs, because what Microsoft does, if you start establishing a pooled environment, a pooled VM environment, in the background it does Sysprep, and it does an unattended installation. It asks you for all the parameters that are required to do an unattended install. And what I did is I tried to find the bits and pieces that explain what's happening behind the scenes. The first challenge that most people who install the VDI role, the Microsoft-only VDI role the first time is, where do I get this Sysprepped image from? How do I create that golden image? And if you have an experienced VDI administrator, you may be able to do that because you have done that before for other target platforms. But if you have never done that before, it's a very good place to go to the script center and to the gallery and on TechNet and find this PowerShell script. And I want to demonstrate you what it does, and it's amazing. Who knows that? Who has done that before? Oh, okay. Well, you should know that. Let's see. This is the one. So I'm in a folder called VMs and Converter, and in there I have this PowerShell script, and I give it the parameter -show UI. If I run that, it says, ooh, it's not a signed script. Do you really want to run that? Because it can harm your computer because you're running it as an administrator. You have to be an administrator to run it. Yes, I really want to do it. Now if you do it, it starts this UI. Now you can choose a source. I have 2 ISOs. I downloaded 2 ISOs. So you see, one is Windows 8.1 Enterprise and the other is Windows Server 2012 R2. So let's open the 8.1 ISO. And you see, it immediately scans the ISO. It finds out what's in the list. Here it's only Enterprise, and you can select if you want to create a VHD or a VHDX. And what the size, the maximum size of this VHDX, this virtual disk, is supposed to be, 40 gig. If I click Make VHD, it just builds that virtual disk, and it's Sysprepped. It's done. It takes like 10 minutes or so to create it.
Why would you ever choose VHD over VHDX? Why would you choose VHD rather than VHDX?
Oh, I would choose VHDX.
Yeah, but why is it?
Oh, well, the question is, why would you choose VHD? Because the script was created in a time when there was only VHD, and they just left it in the script for they didn't want to remove the script part that creates the VHD. The good thing is, you have the script in source code. You can check it out, how it works, and modify it as you want to. And you can also run it from the command line entirely. So you can sort of automate the creation of that kind of master images.
The last option is even more powerful. You can add those fully unattended
Yeah,
file
yeah.
to running it.
Yeah, we are coming to the unattended piece. Slow down, slow down, slow down.
Easy, Tiger.
Yeah, relax. If I take a look at the other one, just to give you an idea when it starts scanning, so now you have the list where you can select, if you want to have the standard core, the standard server, the data center core, or the data center server, including the UI. So I stop it here, but it gives you a good impression. Because what I've done now is, I took this Sysprepped image and did the next step, using Sysprepped image plus PowerShell to automatically create a VM in pretty much the same way like Microsoft does it behind the scenes. And I just listed the number of PowerShell commands that I was using, and I can also show you how these things work. It's pretty simple. I have the IDE open here. Yeah. So if you look at the script that now does the following, it takes the master image, it creates a delta disk and injects everything into this delta disk that is required and attaches it to a newly generated VM and spins up the new VM. So basically this is all in this very short script here. However, if I want to be very honest, you see here that there is this command, new guest VM, with a couple of variables. And this is actually a function that I wrote. And I looked through many of the existing automation tools that are out there. One of them is the PowerShell deployment toolkit. The other is the hydration kit. So there are many of those PowerShell-based scripts out there. And creating the guest VM, here's this new guest VM function. And if you go through that, it creates the new VHD. It creates a VM with no VHD attached, because later I want to attach this particular disk. Here I create the differentiating disk, I mount the differentiating disk, I copy files into it. I copy files into this \Windows Panther. This is the place where the unattended XML goes. And I replace some placeholders in there. The placeholders, they represent variables that I have in an XML file. That makes it very dynamic. And I have an unattended file that also comes with those placeholders. And this allows me to script the process of creating VMs as delta disks. Now, if I really run this script, the script creates 3 of these VMs. How long do you believe is it going to take to use the Sysprepped master image to create 3 VMs and spin them up to run? So if I go here, here's the PowerShell script that I just showed you, reading the XML file and just starting 3 VMs. How long? What would you estimate? Minute?
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay, let's just do it. So now it mounts the disk, it adds some stuff, it starts with the second one.
So while it's doing this, the question I have is,
It's done.
30,
but it's too late for
no more questions.
While you're asking the question, I will show you that now it runs through the unattended piece of it.
so if you're using the PowerShell script to actually create this, is it going to, I mean, do you have to go patch the system up before you actually do it?
Yes. Yes. You have to patch, because that's the idea. You patch the master disk, because as I said, this is like a disposable environment.
Right.
You throw away the machines after a day or 2.
Understood.
And then you patch the master image. If you patch the master image while the differentiating disks are up and running, you crash them.
Okay.
Very simple. You can't do that. Jim?
So the point is not how long it takes to create the shells. The point is how long it takes to have those VMs ready for login, right?
Yeah.
So
And this is what it goes through now. Until everything is up and running, it takes about 5 minutes.
Before you
And
can
it's not connected to a domain. So you see that? Now we're sort of done. Now I have this machine up and running. If I close this, go back here, you see here are these machines created now. If I double click this new machine, it was a fresh machine with everything that I configured in my unattended file and in the XML file that I had. And even, well, the German keyboard that I have on my laptop is included here. Let me show you.
have you tested this at scale?
Oh yeah, we were coming to that.
Oh, sorry.
The time zone was adapted. The keyboard was adapted. Like all the name stuff was adapted. So everything is quite smooth. However, it takes like 5 minutes to create this, to assign it to a domain and everything. So this is the time that a user would have to wait until he can log on.
So does it also register those 3 boxes at the
collection?
This is not in my script, but if you do it through the wizard, yes, it's registered and it's connected to the domain because you need to give it domain credentials to add it to the domain. It also takes care for the DNS stuff and everything. So this is taken care of. Still, in the background, it does an unattended setup.
Benny,
Yep.
have you tried using the persist all device installs setting in the non-attend XML?
Nope, I've not tried that in here.
That will basically bypass the plug and play step as far as I
Okay.
know,
So
so it
it's
should
faster
speed
than-
up the deployment.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good
Apparently
idea.
Azure does that.
Yeah, I've never tried that out. So, just to go through what I've done is I run the PowerShell script. It reads the variables. It creates a lab store. It creates a new VM. Creates a new network adapter. It creates and mounts the differentiating disks. It copies the XML. It modifies the placeholder. Copies the bootstrap. It copies the role dependent stuff into this disk. Modifies the XML configs. Unmounts the VHD from my local machine and adds it to the VM. Okay, I can optionally create more disks and deal with them in the same way if I want to have a disk D as well. But the C, that is the one where the operating system lives on. Okay, this is optional. Then I start the VM. This is the process that took like 13 seconds for 3 machines. The more complicated thing is then booting it and running through the unattended setup. And this is something that can be tuned, absolutely. But it gives you an idea of what happens behind the scene. And I started really digging into the details of how unattended XML works. So if you really want to do a Microsoft-only deployment, you really need to know that stuff. PowerShell and unattended.xml is your, well, is what you really need. It's sorry to tell you, but there's no way out. So now coming to that, high availability and scalability. How good is that? Now I had long conversations with the Microsoft guys, and we did some testing around that. So how can you, well, create some high availability on the RD Web Access side? You use the good old network load balancing that was built for web servers. It still works for those, so that's fine. Physical load balancers is a good idea here, and I would recommend if you want to have larger environments. Now the network load balancing on the gateway side, it was very surprising because it can handle up to 1,000 connections per second per RD gateway. I was really surprised about that number. Unfortunately, the problem is that the gateway needs to be connected to Active Directory, except for, which we found out earlier today, except for Azure Remote App. So obviously Microsoft also thought that this is not a good idea, having the gateway, which is in the DMC, a component that lives in a DMC connected to your Active Directory. So obviously now the latest version, which is not publicly available, of RD Gateway allows you to work without Active Directory, which is something that we wished we had. The problem that we see is with the RD connection broker, because it's 5,000 connections over 5 minutes, plus you need to add a SQL server. And this is something that can be painful. So I know that Frank tried that out several times, and so it is something that is not so easy. You cannot just click through the wizard. It's more because it requires a real SQL server. Something you want to comment?
Well, it's basically you have to take out the connection string. That's most of the pain to get it working.
Yeah. So this is clearly one of the weaknesses that we find in here, that that this broker component is not what we expect it to be. And the funny thing is it requires a SQL server, but it does not generate more than 60 megabytes of data typically in this SQL server. So the question you are asking yourself, why in the world did they want us to use a SQL server for that? And that is a question that cannot be answered so easily. Probably Microsoft just wanted to sell another license of SQL Server if you want to have high availability. That's it. So that's what my guess is. And now coming back to this image size, and the golden image is typically 20 gig. If it lives on an SSD like it does here, it's really fast. If you have pooled images, it does not require more than 5 gig. However, coming back to Jim's question, as soon as you have like 500 of those, it will clearly be the limiting factor. No doubt about that. The IOPS that are required for that kind of disk management is not ideal. Well, you could create not delta disks, but full disk images, but then it's a huge amount of data that is required on the file servers. Then it's pretty much the same amount that you need for private images. Then it's not a difference anymore. And I would not say that you can have more than 200, 300, 400 of those delta images in a standard environment. So you would require definitely a more sophisticated back-end environment. And I'm pretty sure that you can have an educated conversation about that with the guys.
More than happy to talk to anybody about that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Because that's a typical thing that Atlantis solves. So that is very clearly something that Microsoft cannot solve out of the box. Even SMP3 will not be able to help you there, because it's just the sheer amount of data that you're moving back and forth. User profiles. As I said, fortunately, we already had a chat about user profile disk, so I do not want to go into the details here. So you heard that earlier today. Here's the architecture. So what you have is the VHD or VHDX image assigned to each user, and that is what it is, not more, not less. But it cannot be used across collections. So as soon as you have deployments that require multiple collections individual users have access to, you cannot use user profile disks to manage your profiles. So this is just a dialog box where you tick the box. An alternative is when you really want to stick with the Microsoft technology and you would not want to use roaming profiles for that. Please do not use roaming profiles and folder redirection for that. Please don't. The only alternative that you have is UEV. And UEV is part of the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack. It requires SA. We're going to talk about licensing in about 2 minutes. So if you have SA, you have access to UEV. So give it a try. Basically what it does is what Immediate does. Microsoft kind of stole the idea from Immediate. And what they do is they have configuration files that allows them not to look at the entire profiles, but look at individual segments of the profiles, either desktop related, desktop setting related, or application related. You can also group applications into one of those configuration files. And these XML files again, and they're stored in a template catalog on a file share. And the management again is done through PowerShell, WMI. They have a simple XML interface that you can use. But it's nothing where you have a nice and shiny user interface. So it's more hidden from the administrator. You can create your own templates, and this requires something that they call UEV generator. What it basically does, it collects all the information about what the application does in terms of profiles. So it collects the information, what it does on the file system, and what it does in the registry. The good thing is that their event engine is not only log on and log off, it's also application launch and application termination. So it is powerful enough to do something that is pretty close to what Immediate does. It's clearly far away from the stuff that Absence does. So Absence adds a lot of features that are not included in UEV. However, if you want to build a simple VDI only, Microsoft only environment, check out UEV. I mean, here's an overview of the architecture. They have an agent, because you need an agent that sort of finds out when applications are launched and applications are terminated. It talks to the registry and the file system. Here are those packages and the settings that are located on a file share. So, and it writes to those packages on application termination and log off, and it reads from them on log on and on application launch, depending on what you configure. Not very complicated. Here is the UEV generator that helps you to create those templates. So this is how it works. But we already had SA. So licensing is one of those things that are not so good when you look at Microsoft VDI. And I want to shed some light on it, not more than like 2 or 3 minutes, because it is complicated on one side. On the other side, you just need to know a couple of acronyms. The most important ones are SA for software assurance. The other one is VDA for virtual desktop access. So this is for devices that do not qualify for SA. I will show you what the SA thing means. And there's CSL, a companion subscription license. So it's for additional devices that a user may have. And it's regardless of the VDI technology that is used. It could also be VMware and Citrix VDI technology, a VDA licensing or SA or CSL is always required. There's no way out. As soon as you have access to a Windows 8, Windows 7, Windows 8.1 VM, it requires one of those.
One of those is enough.
Yeah. It's very simple. I mean, this is a picture of how that really works. No, seriously. This is how it really works. I try to make it as simple as possible because is it a primary or work device? Yes, if it is it a real Windows machine? Then it requires SA.
You're going to put this online because this is possibly the best document I've seen on licensing for VDA.
So if it's something else, it requires the VDA. So if something has not SA, it requires VDA if it's a primary work device. And then it goes there. No, it's not my primary work device. The question is, hey, do you have a primary work device that's under SA or VDA? That's a Microsoft question. And you say, no, I don't. Okay, so you need that. So it falls back to that. Only if here the answer is no, and here the answer is yes, I already have that, then it checks, it must be a secondary device. If it's a secondary device, is it corporate owned? Yes. Then, if it's a Windows machine, it falls back to SA. If you have Windows RT, it's already included. If it's something else, CSL, up to 4 machines. But you have to be on premises. If you're not on premises, then you can use it if it's less than 10% of your work time. Okay, so you have an iPad and you use it less than a private iPad, less than 10% of your work time, you're fine. You're entering your company, you're entering the door of your company, and you can't use this device anymore. There's no way to enforce it, there's no way to track it, but that's the licensing rules. And Microsoft, go back.
Go back, Benny. Basically, this is now on. Looking at phones from the back, this is on the internet. You are now the official source of Microsoft licensing for VDI.
I mean, these are the official sources.
Okay, they're all rubbish still.
Exactly.
Go back a slide.
It includes a little bit more information, like what is the price, and like $100 per year per device, and all that kind of stuff, and pre-Windows 8. And post-Windows 8 and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we don't have their email address though, Benny.
But there's a licensing trick. And the best trick you can do is do not use Windows 8.1 or Windows 7 VMs. Just use Windows Server 2012 R2 with only one user logged in, because then it's RDS CALs. This is perfectly legal. This is what Amazon does.
Azure does as well.
Yeah.
And if you look at Login VSI, they found out that the scalability of the server operating system with only one user is by 10% better than using Windows 7 or Windows 8.1. This is amazing. So the service queue is optimized to run from the cloud while the workstation's queue is not. So that
In
is
all
something-
fairness, though, if you think about it, server operating system
Yep.
in the cloud, workstation. You know, there's a clue in the name, isn't there? Really.
Yeah, that's your interpretation of it. Okay, final notes from the field, because that sort of wraps it up. So you have to find out what you really want to do. Now we had this conversation about, is it Windows 7, 8, or 8.1? You would prefer the 32-bit. However, most people use the 64-bit because it's easier to manage it because they are used to working with 64-bit. 2 vGPUs are optimal. I'm going to talk about the comparison between the features of remote effects and the rest of the protocols in just 20 seconds. IOPS and storage capacity, I had that before. That is the most critical piece of it. Application virtualization, not included in the story. Yes, you get the license for RDS environments, for AppV, but not for VDA. So you need SA in order to have the right to use AppV. So this is a critical thing. Antivirus and VDI, check out what the Login VSI people have to say about that. That is really interesting. So as I promised, here's the comparison. And you see, this is what we're talking about when it comes to Microsoft-only VDI. And you see, everything that goes beyond OpenGL 1.1 is not supported by Microsoft. No OpenGL, no OpenCL, no CUDA. And if you look at the other players in the market, they can do it. Microsoft cannot. So do not let Microsoft tries to fool you every now and then, trying to tell you that they support that kind of stuff. They don't. Documentation sucks. It's unsupported. You cannot mix and match RDSH and RDVH in the collection. There is no third-party secure access solution. We tried to replace the gateway. We did not find a good solution for that, unfortunately. The RD gateway, it's not enterprise ready. PowerShell is not really an enterprise management solution, but that is the thing that they really want to do. It is not for those admins that sit in front of the console and trying to manage users. We can do it, absolutely. I wish I was able to do a big RDS Microsoft-only project, because we could, it's billable hours endless.
PowerShell is not ops.
Correct.
So I think that's the distinction there. It's not for an enterprise management solution. Yes, if you are an expert.
Oh yeah,
but for
absolutely.
ops, PowerShell is not.
And that
not
is
the
what
way
it
to go.
means. That is what it means here. And there is no dedicated RDS management and monitoring available. No integration of AppV and UAV. It's incompatible. If you look at the profile management solution, we had one customer that used those side by side. Holy cow. That was really complicated to sort things out, to find out which profile portions were stored where. And SCVMM, yeah, you can start using it, but it does not cover the typical scenarios for VDI. Yeah, the client platforms are incomplete. I mentioned that before. Pooled VDI, it's not very scalable, and it's definitely not manageable. Because as soon as you have like 3, 4, or 5 master images, things get really dirty. Because you need to upgrade them, update them manually, and all that kind of stuff.
So,
no pass-through GP.
But I mean, that's exactly the same with MCS, with
Yeah.
with Horizon. There's no difference there, right?
But they have the same kind of limitations. And I showed you the limited user and system management capabilities. You could use System Center Orchestrator, but there are no blueprints out there. So we have to invent the wheel before we can start using that kind of product out there. Okay, so again, documentation, we need the MVPs. User experience with remote effects, good, but incomplete. Admin experience, you've seen it. I've shown you everything. Small and medium enterprise ready, yeah, you could use it in small enterprises. Enterprise ready, no way. Licensing, fix VDA. The only thing that they have now is Windows 8 VMs on Azure. If you have an MSDN subscription, you find those out there. The question is, does Microsoft know? Yes, they do. So you look at that. I asked them several times, and I asked them in a way that they allowed me to use this quote. And they said, well, what would you recommend what we do out there in the field? And they said, we would recommend Citrix plus Microsoft first. If the customer really doesn't want that, then tell them there's no high-scale admin GUI, we don't have the correct client supported, we have not the correct host supported, and it's only scalable if you combine it with PowerShell. They know. The question is, are they going to do something about it? But this is the reason why there are hardly any Microsoft-only VDI projects out there. Thank you very much.